and welcome back to another video. In this one, we're going to be covering Go's errors. We'll show some examples, functions that return errors, how to properly handle them, and how they're different from other languages like Java and C# that use try-catch. And lastly, write a function that returns both a value and an error and some idiomatic ways of handling them. Let's get right into it. Our first example is going to start with converting a string to an integer. And in order to do so, we need to use the string conversion package. So we'll import strconv for stir conversion. And I'm going to have a string called num_str, and it's going to be equal to 10. Now we cannot add or subtract, multiply, or anything with this num_str. We need to convert it into an actual integer. So here I will create num, and it will be equal to stir convert, and we'll say a to I. And if we hover over this, it says a to I is equivalent to parse int converted to type int. So basically this is giving us back an integer given some sort of string. And you can see in this documentation right here that it takes a string as a parameter, but it returns two things to us, an int and an error. So let's see what this actually looks like. So if I pass in num_str, that's proper syntax so far, but remember this function is returning to us two different things, the number and an error back to us. Now since the Go compiler is all about that we need to make reads, or we need to read every variable, well, we need to do that. And instead of doing the whole try catch situation, Go instead just returns an error so that it forces the developer to directly handle that error at that moment rather than passing it off to someone else or somewhere else down the line. So idiomatically you can use the if okay idiom. So I'll say if error is not nil, then we'll print something out. So format.println error converting string to number, and we need to also import the format package. And so if it's not nil, we'll go ahead and print something out, and we'll do an early exit here. We'll just return. If we make it past this check right here, we'll do a quick print line saying the string was converted, and we'll actually change this to a printf, and we'll print out the value. Then we'll say num. Okay, so that's it right there. Let's go ahead and run this to make sure the program works. And we get the string was converted and then 10, which was the value. Now, what if our num_str wasn't actually a number as a string? Let's just say it was a. Well, let's run this again. And we get that there was an error converting the string to a number because a is not a number. So there's like the quick overview of what an error is, but let's actually look more into this. So if we go over to some documentation, we can see that from the Go developers themselves, they built this whole entire a tour of Go, and they talk about errors here, and they say the error type is actually a built-in interface. So we just covered interfaces in the previous video, and this interface just has one definition in it. It's just that you conform to the error interface if you have a single function, or if you just have a function at all. It's called error that takes no arguments and returns a string. That's it. So to help along with this, if we wanted to write functions that returned, say, our own errors, well, then there's the errors package. So over at package.go.dev/errors, we have some documentation here. So it says package errors implements functions to manipulate errors. The new function, which is basically the only function that we'll really use from this, creates errors whose only context is a text message. And that's how a lot of the errors that we receive back, they tend to be, at least at the simple and high level. We don't need to worry about all the unwrapping just quite yet. So let's go ahead and take a look back at the code of writing a function that could potentially throw an error. We're going to write some quick logic here determining if someone is eligible to be a candidate for the president of the United States. So let's clear our console and let's remove some of this here. So in the United States, you have to be at least 35 years old to become president, or at least apply, be a candidate, whatever the proper term is. So I will say age is equal to 25. And down here, we're going to have a function that says apply for presidency. And this function is going to return two things. It's going to return a string that will basically say valid or invalid, and it will return an error. And this function on top of this must take in an int, which would be an age. So we'll say age, which is an int. Let's open up the braces. So if we want to return some sort of error in this function, it would probably be that the passed in age was less than what we expected it to be. So we can say if age is less than 35, then we can go ahead and do an early return from this function, right? So when we need to return an error, we also have to return a string with this. So when you do this, you typically return the 0 value for all the other values in the return set. So we'll return an empty string, and then now we need to call on that errors package that we just covered. So it would be errors.New, and we'll say residents must be at least 35 years old. And now there are two conventions with this, and one I already broke, is that they should should not be capitalized, and you should not use punctuation. So no period, no exclamation point. This is exactly what an error message should look like in Go. So now that we have the negative case covered for this function, we can go ahead and just return something else. So we'll say you are eligible for presidency, and we can't end it there. We have to return some sort of value for the error. And since errors are an interface, we can just do nil because that is the 0 value for an interface. And that's it for this function. So now we just need to call it. So we'll say message as in MSG and error is equal to apply for presidency given some sort of age. And like we did with the whole entire string to integer conversion, we'll say if error is not nil, then we'll go ahead and print out the error. So we'll say error message colon and then %v. We'll say error.Error because remember we're using the error interface, and the error interface defines that every error will have the error function that returns some sort of string. So if it's not nil, then we do that. We'll go ahead and return from the main function. Otherwise, we'll just print out the other message that we got. So MSG. So let's run this again and we get error message. Presidents must be at least 35 years old. Now let's change this to 35, save and run this. And we get you are eligible for presidency. So that's the quick basic pieces of errors in Go. And now we don't just have to use the errors.New function to create an error. The fmt package also has an errorf function. Let's clear the console and let's go take a look at that. So we no longer want to use this anymore. And instead, we'll just replace it with fmt.Errof. As you can see, it takes in some sort of format string and then var args afterwards and then returns an error. So this is just like the printf function. Instead, we're getting an error back. So let's take a look. We'll say cannot apply for presidency with age, and we can do a %v, then pass in the age that was given. We can go ahead and save this and now change this back to 25 up here, and let's run this to make sure that we get the age given back to us. We get error message, cannot apply for presidency with age 25. Now I did make one mistake here, and when we return errors, we cannot end them with new lines either. It's no new lines, no punctuation, and we don't capitalize them at the beginning. So we'll remove the new line at the end. Go ahead, run this, and there we go. That new line is no longer there. And that's all you need to know to get started with handling errors and writing your own functions that have errors in Go. If you made it this far in the video and you learned something and you enjoyed the video, I encourage that you like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.